And we're really excited to be holding this webinar for you guys today, all about housing options for Arizona residents with developmental disabilities. Can everyone hear me okay? I just want to make sure that my audio is working. We are going to hear from a slate of 3 presenters. And first up, we are going to hear from Ginger Pottenger. Ginger is going to share her family story finding housing with her adult daughter, Candy. Ginger formerly served as the director for the ARC of Arizona. Secondly, we'll hear from Tracy Gruenberger. She is the executive director of Mosaic in Arizona. She's been there for about a year, and prior to that, she served at the East Valley Adult Services Organization, and prior to that, the Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest Organization. We'll hear from Megan Akins after Tracy. Megan is the HUD supervisor at the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And after that, we'll host some questions, which you can type in the chat box. We'll get started with Ginger. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks, Sarah. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ginger Pottenger. The thing I'm probably the most well known for is I'm Candy's mom. My oldest daughter was born with moderate IDD, more years than I want to remember right now. Candy is 53, so we have been down this road when it comes to housing for quite some time. What I really like to do is give you just a little bit of a background. As I said, Candy was born 53 years ago and was diagnosed with moderate intellectual disabilities. We were kind of on the cutting edge of a lot of things that were happening at that point in time in Candy's life. We went through school. We lived at that point in time, we lived in Wichita, Kansas. When Candy was ready to graduate from high school, her sister was also graduating, and her younger sister was going off to college. Candy decided that she didn't want to live at home anymore either, that if Christy can go away, that means she can go away too. So immediately I began thinking of, my gosh, what are the options that are going to be available for Candy? I worked with, at that point it was called something different, but today it would be the Division of Developmental Disabilities in Kansas. And we eventually found a residential placement for Candy. Again, we've kind of been through all of the possible ones. She started out in a group home, eventually decided that really wasn't what she wanted to do. And so we moved into her own apartment with supports. The first apartment she ever lived in was a HUD housing project. Again, it was in Kansas, and it really worked well for Candy at that point. I then moved to Nebraska, and Candy followed with me. And when she moved to Nebraska, we rented her own apartment for her. We lived there for 5 years. She had supports from, again, the Division of Developmental Disabilities, and she worked on multiple job sites through the division. We eventually moved back to Kansas, and she again lived, that time she lived in a shared housing arrangement with a person who did not have a disability but worked in the field, and that worked really well for Candy, and she enjoyed that. She was working in the community at that point in time and liked her housing arrangement that she had. When we moved to Arizona, which was 20 years ago. We found it a little more difficult to kind of navigate the system. And Candy now lives in, she started out when we lived in Arizona, she started out in an apartment with supports from DDD. Now she lives in a townhouse. We made the decision that it would be better if Candy lived in an arrangement where I always knew she'd always have a place to live. So I developed a trust, a family trust, and we bought a townhome that was about, I don't know, maybe a half a mile from where I lived. At that point in time, I was single, had not married my husband yet, that I have now, who's a wonderful man and supports Candy tremendously. But we bought the townhouse and Candy moved into it. One of the things about having that townhouse in a trust, and I'm the trustee along with her sister Christy, we know Candy will always have a place to live. She is always going to be, nobody's going to tell her she has to move out. We aren't going to have an apartment complex that gets sold. We've been very lucky with staff. Candy has long-term staff, people who have been working with her for years, and I know that is not always the way it is. There are times, there's a picture you can see now of Candy. She's in her house in front of her Christmas tree, and that's her dog Jazz in front of her. You know, we're very lucky with the staff that we have that provides support to Candy. Again, we've had providers that have worked with Candy for 10 years or more, and that doesn't always happen. But part of it is because we work really hard for good matches for Candy, so that way folks who work with her know her well, buy into the fact that she wants to be as independent as she can, and they provide the kind of support that we are looking for Candy. One of the things when she moved into her townhouse, well, when she lived in any apartment, was to make sure that safety was always something that we could do. We wanted to make sure that Candy was as safe as she could, that she had the kind of environment, because she does spend the night by herself after her staff leave in the evenings. You know, Candy's there all night long. She gets herself up in the morning. She gets herself off to work, which I haven't said. Work for Candy has always been very important. We've been a variety of, she's worked on job crews, she's worked in supported employment. Right now she works at Fry's, not terribly far from where she lives, and she's worked for Fry's for 8 years. They've been a tremendous support of Candy, and they provide the kind of support at her work environment that allows her to work at home or to live where she does. One of the things that we did when Candy first moved into her townhouse is we made sure we got her on the list for HUD housing. Section 8 through the city of Glendale. She eventually got approved. She no longer receives that support, but I would encourage most families that they need to try that if at all possible, get themselves on a waiting list if they're looking for additional financial support. Now with Candy working, she doesn't need that HUD financial support anymore, and it makes more sense for her to be off of Section 8 and allow that to go to somebody else who needs that level of support. Her family is very involved. Again, we had to research all of the possible things that allowed Candy to be able to live as independent as she can. And it it gives me as mom a certain amount of security to know we've got things set up now. So when either I'm not able to be as involved as I am, or when I am no longer here and Candy's sister is the one that's providing that support, we've already got things set up. So I will now turn it over to the next presenter.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tracy Gruenberger. I'm the Executive Director at Mosaic in Arizona. Wanted to share some information with you about adult developmental homes, which is a housing option available to folks here in Arizona, which was created by Arizona Administrative Code Article 11. Adult developmental homes are where caring community members, whether they be an individual or a family, open up their own home to host an individual with a developmental disability. All of the homes are licensed through the Arizona Office of Licensure, Certification, and Registration, and are inspected by a life safety inspector before the license can be issued, and then every 3 years to ensure that the home is safe and fit for a person to live there. Our role at Mosaic and the role of all agencies that provide adult developmental home services is to license and monitor the homes. At Mosaic, we do monthly visits at the homes to provide support to both the provider and the person who is living there. In addition to those monthly visits, we are available 24/7, 365 to make sure that our providers can provide the care to the person or people living with them. Each developmental home can have between 1 and 3 individuals that are living there in the home. The home really does become the home, and the provider becomes family or second family to the person with a developmental disability. Homes are located in neighborhoods and apartment complexes throughout Arizona, and for the most part, you would never know that they were there. Each person living in the home has their own bedroom and can decorate that bedroom to their own taste. And they have a high level of privacy that way, having their own bedroom. Like I said, it is the person's home, and so visitors and family involvement is highly encouraged. Families can be involved as they really want to be. There are individuals who go home for visits every weekend, and family members who come for dinner during the week, take folks shopping, and then we have other folks that we support in developmental homes whose families are not involved to that level. Although visits are highly encouraged, we always, of course, ask that family members and visitors do respect the household as a whole, and not just show up at midnight for a visit, but again, visits are highly encouraged. In addition, transportation is provided by the provider and the family, so transportation is available to doctor's appointments, day programs, work, and home visits, or just other ways that community involvement happens. Adult developmental homes are really partnerships between families and the host family, and the involvement and input from the person with a disabilities family is highly important. Families of people with disabilities know those folks better than anyone, and input and suggestions are extremely helpful to our providers in providing that support that the person may need. These caring providers are responsible for the care needs and ensuring that there is community involvement. Again, transportation to work, day programs, events, doctor's appointments. They provide medication administration and really provide that loving family environment while providing those services and supports for people. As part of the licensing process, there's a thorough background check to ensure that providers are solid in terms of those things. So all providers have a fingerprint clearance card. There's a thorough home study that's required in order for licensing to happen. The licensing agency writes that home study. And I always tell people who are interested in becoming providers, the state wants to make sure that the folks that they're licensing are stable and people of character. And so just be prepared for questions and information to be requested from really the day you were born until this very minute. In addition, as part of the licensing process, quite a bit of training is required, anywhere between 20 and 30 hours before licensing for an adult developmental home, and even more than that if a provider wants to work with children under the age of 18. And then 10 hours a year is required in order to maintain that license from year to year. Some of the trainings that are required are first aid CPR, abuse and neglect training, medication administration, introduction to developmental disabilities, and many other topics are also covered during the pre-licensure training, and then that ongoing training from year to year. While experience isn't required to become a developmental home provider, most of the folks that we work with, I would say about 95% of those folks either are or have in the past worked with people with a developmental disability, and most of those folks in a group home type setting. So what are the benefits of a developmental home? Unlike some other housing options, there's really no staff turnover in a developmental home. The family lives there with the person, and so there aren't different staff coming in from day to day and shift to shift. It's the same people who are there all the time. So good, strong relationships are developed over time and are able to be maintained because there's no staff turnover. Because there's no staff turnover, the expectations are consistent from day to day. Sometimes in other housing options, the staff in the morning might ask the person to do something one way, but then the staff in the afternoon wants something done entirely differently, and it kind of leaves the person confused and just really not knowing what to expect from how people want things done, and or how they're asking people to do things. Also, community integration is a huge benefit with adult developmental homes because when the family or individual goes out on an outing, then then the person goes with them, and so it really does become a normal flow of life. So just like um, you go to the grocery store, then if you have groceries to get as an adult developmental home provider, then the person with a disability, um, if they want to go along, then they can go along to the grocery store or to the movies. Or we have people who are coaching youth soccer alongside their provider because the provider's children are in a youth soccer league. The provider is a soccer coach, and so the person living with them also is a soccer coach. And recently they went to a soccer tournament in Texas, and it was amazing because that was the first time that the person had ever been out of the state of Texas, or out of the state of Arizona. We also see decreased behavioral challenges in developmental homes because there are fewer people living together. A lot of times when there are roommates in a congregate setting where there are more people living together, roommates tend to get on each other's nerves and learn how to push buttons of the other person, and that doesn't happen in a smaller setting with fewer people in it. Also, there are many more individualized services and supports that can be offered in an adult developmental home because there aren't as many people living there. So it's easier to meet those individual needs of the person with a disability. At Mosaic, one of the unique things we do is we have what matters most conversations with all of our folks on an annual basis. And so we really learn what's important to them. And then we work with our providers to make that happen for the person throughout that coming year. All of our providers are working with the individuals that live with them on goals and things that they want to achieve, and all of those things are being tracked on a regular basis so that we know when those goals are accomplished, and we can celebrate when those goals get accomplished. One of the critical things with adult developmental homes is the matching process. We want to make sure that when a person moves in with a provider, that it's a good match. It's important, and that's really a key to success. So in order to make that happen, before anybody moves into our homes, we try and have 2 to 3 pre-move-in visits where folks are having dinner together, might be an overnight visit, might be a weekend visit, so that they really are starting to get to know one another and see if they can live with each other, because not everybody can live with each other, and we want it to be as successful as possibly can be. So that's a key to making an adult developmental home match successful. Now I want to switch and talk a little bit about individually designed living arrangements, which is another housing option for folks here in Arizona. Unlike adult developmental homes, in an IDLA for short, it's the person's with a disability owns or leases the housing. So could be an apartment, it could be a townhouse, like Ginger spoke of earlier, or it could be a standalone house. Generally, staff are coming in to provide the services and supports that the people need to be able to continue to live in the apartment, and Staff supports range greatly depending on the needs of the people living there, from maybe a few hours a day to 24 hours in a day. The folks with developmental disabilities choose their roommates. So generally in an IDLA, there are two people living together, and they have generally made those arrangements prior to moving in into the housing that they're living in. Individualized services and supports are available. Staff are working with folks on goals and on providing supports for activities of daily living, community involvement, work, medical appointments, a lot of the same things that the adult developmental home providers are working on with folks. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Megan, who will talk some more about housing options.
Hello everyone, I can see my audio is working. So my name is Megan Akins. I'm with the Division of Developmental Disabilities, the HERO unit. I'm here to talk to you today about new and innovative housing options for members of the division. As the webinar's title, Beyond Group Homes, suggests, I'd like to share with you some of the new opportunities that are available to our members. Information is always changing. Please check with the division for the most current information. In 2015, Arizona was one of 29 states to be awarded a grant from HUD for $3 million. That was awarded to the Arizona Department of Housing, the Arizona Department of Health Services, Access, and the division, and it is to provide funding for 64 apartments for division members. I'm seeing some pictures up there. Those are nice. So basically, we have a couple of different opportunities, and because we got this grant through HUD, we got also an additional 27 apartments from the Housing Authority of Maricopa County, where they set aside those apartments for our members. So we have the 64 that were funded through the HUD grant, and then the 27 apartments that are funded through the Housing Authority of Maricopa County. And I see a question from Lindsay down here, and it says, wasn't there something a while ago for individuals with autism? I think that, Lindsay, all of the housing availability through the division is not specifically towards one diagnosis. And I do believe that there is something, but that's not division funded, so I'm not going to be talking about that today. But if you want to send me an email at Makens, M-A-K-E-N-S, I can get you that information. And I see a bunch of people are typing, so I'm going to give you a minute. First place, yes. That's it. Okay, yes, good. So basically, the eligibility for these apartments that are brand new and renovated, they have all brand new appliances. They've got washers, dryers, stoves, microwaves. They're very, very nice. I would move in any day. But the eligibility for these apartments are, the member must be between the ages of 18 and 61. They have to be a member of the division, all tax eligible, and they have to have an active ISP. And they have to meet housing and financial requirements. Housing and financial requirements are things like they can't be a registered sex offender. They need to pass a credit check. In this particular credit check at this property, they're not looking to see if you have good credit. They're looking to see if you paid your rent. So just because somebody doesn't have a lot of credit, or they have no credit, or they have bad credit, that's not something that would disqualify them from applying for these opportunities. They just need to make sure that they don't owe any previous landlords money. So either they are all paid up and current, or if they do owe money to previous landlords, this particular property will allow them to make a payment plan and prove that they have made a payment to the landlord, and then they will let them continue on with the process. So they're just looking for that. And then they also run a background check and make sure that anyone living in the home is not a sex offender, a lifetime registered sex offender, and that they have no violent history of crimes. Any crimes that may pose a danger to their neighbors or their community around them, they can say, no, we don't think it's a good fit. And then that person has the opportunity to appeal. And then if they appeal and they explain the situation, then the housing provider has the opportunity to say, yes, let's go forward with this process, or no, let's not, this isn't a good fit. So those are some of the things that are about the application process to the property. Once you determine, and I know that there's a lot of different people on here that are, some maybe parents or support coordinators, but this really needs to be a team decision to move forward with the process. The reason for that is because we want to make sure that the member has the skills that are needed to live independently. This is moving into their own home. It is an apartment. It's not a division. We don't monitor these homes. We move people in and provide the services, and that is the extent of the division's involvement. We check on them and we let them call us, and we'll, if they need something, we'll try to problem solve with them. But this really is their own home, and they really need to have the skills to do that. So some of the paperwork that they're going to need to apply once the team makes the decision that they are eligible to apply for these apartments are Social Security cards, picture IDs, birth certificates, any documentation on their income, and the paperwork that is needed when they closer to their move-in, which is within 60 days. They would need a Social Security award letter, any financial information about their job or their assets, and application. Now, we always tell members when we apply, when we start the application process, that there is a lot of paperwork. And I know you all are divisions. I see some questions. Give me 1 second. I know you all are familiar with the divisions paperwork, but HUD has a lot more paperwork, and it's a big packet. So my staff, the support coordinators, myself, we're all available to help with that process. Let me get to your questions. Okay. Who owns the apartments? Well, the grant provides for 64 apartments, and we haven't identified those yet. We've identified maybe about half of the apartments, but we're in the works of getting a contract with HUD, which is called a RAC, with the owners of the apartments, so we're not going to share names yet with that. And then Adrian is asking me, do you count Social Security in addition to work income in the income eligibility? Yes, the income eligibility is calculated by taking all of the adult members, if they're not members, all the adult household members income. So it could be Social Security, it could be working, and they are all added together, and then we take 30% of that for rent. So that would be what the property would do. So they add all the income together. There's a couple of deductions that are complicated to get into, but and they divide that, and then from the adjusted monthly income, they will take 30% of that for rent. And then the other question is, are they all over the state? Adrian, we are working on that. We're building our relationships, and that's why this is innovative. We currently are in negotiations with properties that are only in Phoenix. Yes, we're really excited too. She says great. So I'm going to get back to the paperwork if nobody else has any questions. I don't see any of that. Gathering the paperwork, we always tell them it's a long process. It's a lot of paperwork. Sometimes we have to do it in a few meetings because members sometimes get a little bit frustrated because it is a lot to do. But it's always a good it's a good learning. We're learning with everyone, and every situation is different. So we look forward to working with those members that are applying. Part of the application process is developing some appropriate independent living goals. We really try hard to talk to our members and our support coordinators about the things that would help our members be successful in independent living. Things like learning to use transportation, getting a bus pass. We had one member that figured out with a friend how to go downtown and get a reduced fare bus pass. It's kind of a process. They had to get a picture ID through the Valley Metro, and then they figured out the bus route together. So there's things like learning the transportation, managing your finances. How do you pay your rent? When is your rent due? Where is the closest bank? How do I get money? And if you have a payee, what is the plan to get the rent paid? How are we going to pay our electricity? And what else? Being a good neighbor. We have people that are trying to knock on people's doors at inappropriate hours, kind of teaching them what's appropriate, making sure that you're not making too much noise, making sure that the place around your apartment is clean, that you're following community rules. Co-felt, they have a program, a book of rules that we go over with our members, and they learn the different requirements of that property. Didn't I hear that Valley Metro offers a program that helps people with disabilities figure out the bus system? I haven't heard about that, Lindsay. We did call Valley Metro and ask for a bunch of bus books, but I haven't heard about that one. Oh, I see a bunch of people are typing. Huh. If you remember, Amy, let us know. I'll Google it too. Lynn says, yes, they do. That's cool. Cool. That's good to know. See, sharing resources. It's all about making relationships and making sure that you know what's available. And it's been a learning process for all of us. We called 211 ourselves to try to get some different resources, or we'll call and say, hey, we have this number. We won't share any information, but we kind of give a scenario, and they say, oh, okay. ABLE accounts will be rolled out shortly in Arizona. Those are the accounts where people can put money in for housing. Oh, Erica is answering an earlier question that says it doesn't count against public benefits, and these new accounts will work with HUD housing options. And I see that Daryl's typing also. Ability 360 offers members training. Oh, nice. I was just down there the other day. Check the dates and times at ability360.org. Sorry, it's very tiny on my screen. That's great. That's good to know. Thank you. So more about developing your independent living skills. You want to make sure that these members have independent living skills in their ISPs when you're meeting with their planning team. Even if they're not quite ready, you want to provide them the skills that they'll need in the future. So you can start working on things like using the bus system or going to Ability 360 and learning the Metro. I was going to show you, I was going to pull up some resources and share my screen with you. So it's going to take me 1 minute here. Bear with me. Oh. Okay, so just so you all know, I cannot see the chat box right now, so I will get to your questions when I click back over. I wanted to share some resources that we have found in keeping affordable housing and members engaged. So the first one is the Southwest Fair Housing Council. Now the Southwest Fair Housing Council gives free training. You can contact them and ask them to come out to your agencies, or they actually train the DDD staff. They're the first half of or the second half of our fair housing training that we provide to support coordination. We have trained over 500 people in fair housing in the division. About half of those are support coordinators, and then the other half is their supervisors. And the Southwest Fair Housing Council has helped us do that. But basically what you need to know about them is that they help when there is maybe things that are going on that aren't fair in your housing, or that people are discriminating. They will bring lawsuits against companies that aren't following the federal law or the state law. So that's a good resource, and they have a lot of good letters for accommodations and things like that. So if you kind of just poke around their website, it's swfhc.com, and you can just kind of look at the resources. But there is a tab that's called Resources right here, and you click on it, and they have all sorts of letters and things that you can use. The next resource is the list of housing authorities. And actually, I think I can see what you're writing now. Yes, okay. So the list of housing authorities, you would think that since there's a Maricopa County Housing Authority, that there would be no other housing authorities in Maricopa County, but that is not the case. There is all sorts of housing authorities in each in cities, and this is a list of all the housing authorities in Arizona. So if you're a member or your child is looking for a place that's affordable, a good place to start is with the city housing authority and county. So this list is down on the left-hand side of your screen under the downloads. Under the downloading options, and you can click the link and download it, or you can just go to AZ or housing.az.gov and download it yourself if you're wondering if it's the most current version when you go to look at it in the future. And then it provides the telephone number and link to each city and each housing authority. And then the last part that I wanted to share with you is you are only as good as your Google search terms. That is, sometimes when you're searching for something and you're not using the right term, you're not really getting the right response that you need, right? One of the things that we have learned about as we've gone through the trainings and met on a quarterly basis with Access and met with the Arizona Department of Housing is that the cities have money for what's called eviction prevention. You have members or people that you know that are at risk of getting evicted, you can Google the city, which we'll just do Flagstaff right here, and prevention support or eviction prevention. It helps if you spell it right. Eviction prevention. And then you can see all of the tools that they have available. So the cities get funding for these things, and you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of everything that's out there. The other resource that you can use is 211. You can also Google furniture banks. We've noticed that as members move in, depending on where they're coming from, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now that you've seen all of this. Depending on where they're coming from, some of them come from group homes, some of them come from adult developmental homes. Some of them come from adult developmental homes. Some of them are just moving out of their family home. So they all have different types of needs that they have. And so we ask that if you need assistance in getting resources, that you let us know, or you let your support coordinator know, and we can all work together. Some other housing resources are socialserve.com. Oh, and I can show you that too. I didn't pull that up ahead of time. Give me 1 second. But socialserve.com basically has a list of all different now I don't, I wonder if I can do it this way. Can you see that?
Hold on, Megan. Let me stop sharing the PowerPoint.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. I knew I was missing a button somewhere. Okay. Okay, so now you can see that. Sorry about that. So socialserve.com is a pretty neat website, and I'm going to click on Arizona because that's who we are. And you can look at and see all different apartments that are available and how they're affordable. So some apartments will subsidize rent, some apartments will do a sliding scale rent, but there's all different programs available, and the only way that you know is if you look. So if you look in Phoenix at, let's see here. You're going to say show areas only starting with Phoenix. And then we're going to click on Phoenix here. And then you can select the criteria that you want. Where do you want to live? Do you have a voucher? And you're going to look and see what vouchers are available on the Housing Authority list that we shared with you. And then it says how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, and then optional filters. Are there wait lists? Some properties are open, some properties are waitlist specific. So maybe you have a voucher that you can take anywhere, but this property is a property that has their own specific waitlist, then you would apply it at that property. And then you can even specify the zip code and if it's near public transportation. And you can specify the language that the landlord speaks. So we're just going to click here to search and go with the defaults. And then you can see here that all of the apartments are listed. It gives you a range. It tells you how they charge their rent, what deposits there are, and if there's availability. So this is a really good tool. It's socialserve.com, and it will let you filter and tell you what's available. And Daryl says that socialserve.com doesn't necessarily give current updated information, unfortunately. We haven't run into that a few times, and we did actually call one apartment and just test it, just to see if it was updated or not. And they said they were having an issue with something, and they were hoping that it was going to be updated soon. So there are some issues, but it is a really good search tool, and it might not be totally accurate, but it's a good improvement from nothing. And then do we have any other questions in the chat box? No. Oh, and then somebody has written another resource in the chat box. It's called findhelpphx.org. And Adrian says, exactly, I've tried to search for the best practice housing programs for adults with intellectual disabilities, even in other states. Erica recommended specializedhousing.org in Mass to look into. I like their model, but it's far away. Good. Very good. And then Adrian says, yay, that's my program. And she's still typing, so we'll give her a minute. And lots of people are typing. Quick question. If an individual were to become ineligible for Altex, can they reapply at a later date? Yes. absolutely. You can always reapply. Eligibility is redetermined also. Yes. Sometimes we have people that fall off of eligibility, maybe because they're over-resourced, and then they spend down the money, and then they're under-resourced, and then they reapply, and they're fine. I see Amy and Adrian are still typing. Is there a link between the HUD housing and access or Medicaid? Well, kind of. The grant that we applied for is specific to people with disabilities. We wanted to make sure that we're following Olmsted, right? And so none of our properties have more than 25% of our members in them. The property that we have right now has 305 apartments, and 27 of them are for division members. And the division members are very integrated in the community. They are they're integrated in the community, and they're spread out. They're not next door to each other. They get their apartments as they're available. Oh, and the link also is that they have to be all-text eligible. So is there a link between HUD housing, access, or Medicaid? That link is that they have to be all-text eligible. Does anyone know, this is Adrian again, anyone know of a best practice independent housing program that supports working adults with ID in any of the Western states? Independent housing program. Are case managers trained to help with completing all the paperwork? Actually, Amy, that's a really good question, and we do train them, but our office, the HERO office within DDD, we're DDD workers, we sit with the caseworker and the member and complete the paperwork. And sometimes just the member or the family. It would be my staff that did that, but they are trained. But it's a lot of paperwork, and it's a lot. And Amy's still typing.
There was one other question, Lindsay, above. It says, if the person becomes ineligible for all text, would they still be eligible to receive DDD services?
If a person is, yes. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question very well.
It is.
Can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
No problem. It is Lindsay's question in the chat. If the person becomes...
Yes. Okay, if a person becomes ineligible for all text, would they still be eligible to receive DDD services? Well, if a person isn't eligible for all text, those are where all text funds the services like attendant care, habilitation, housekeeping, those sorts of services. All those services that providers provide to the member, those are funded through all text. So if they become ineligible for all text, they can still get DDD case management at some times, but they don't always, but they won't get the services like the habilitation or the attendant care and things like that that are funded through our state Medicaid agency, which is Access. Okay.
This is Tracy. The adult developmental homes are also funded through All-Tax as well as the IDLA services.
Yes, that's correct. And so are our group homes. The habilitation in the group homes is funded through All-Tax.
Tracy, there was an earlier question while you were presenting. It is, how is it that they own the home? I thought they weren't allowed to own anything of value more than $2K unless in and able, or can they because it is in a trust?
That is not a division. Sorry, go ahead.
So just like Ginger had mentioned, the home would be like in a trust situation.
Lynn wants to know, will you be providing your office contact information so we can share it with members? Sure, you can have my, I can provide my information, but the application and the decision needs to come from the team, and the referral has to come from the support coordinator, because we have trained the support coordinators to identify who's eligible and who can be referred. Our office contact information is 602-542-0891 is Tanya, our housing coordinator. And that's, again, 602-542-0891. And my office cell phone is 480-341-2008. And you can email me at makens@azdes.gov. And lots of people are typing now. Okay, curious. This situation was presented at a Stark Family Trust / Able Accounts conference. It was posed that the spouse of someone in a trust could gain in a divorce type situation monies that were set aside for the individual with a disability. Is that true? What if there is a prenup is the question. That's not a question for me, so I'm going to let somebody else take that.
This is Tracy. I don't have any information to share on that.
Daryl says ABLE accounts are currently available through the Ohio model and allow for up to $15,000 a year contributions with a $462,000 lifetime cap. This will roll out in Arizona in February and administered by DES. Stay tuned for a golden opportunity. Erica says call the AZ Center for Disability. And Lindsay says, okay, I guess that's a trust question for a lawyer. Exactly, Lindsay. And then Erica McFadden says law. Amy says, I have a number of wealth management lawyers who I can recommend to you to call about the trust, and she's provided her email address. Okay. So that is all the information that I have, unless anyone has any other questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah.
Hi everyone, I had connection issues earlier, so I'm using Tracy's computer now, but you're asking a lot of great questions. And yes, Steve, we are recording this. We will be sending out the recorded version, which will appear on our YouTube channel within the next couple days. We have a really quick turnaround. So if you're interested in having that recording and you're not already signed up for our email mailing list, simply comment in the chat box that you'd like to sign up for that. That's how we typically send out our announcements for both the recorded webinar sessions and new webinar sessions. Was there any questions that people didn't get answered? Now is the time to type it in the chat box. We don't want anyone to feel that they've been missed, because this is such an important topic. Daryl, I noticed that you mentioned the ABLE accounts. And funny enough, that is going to be the topic of our next webinar. And I'm hoping that all of you will share that link when it's announced. And here's why. ABLE accounts, which will be rolling out here in Arizona in February, are going to be valid for housing. So all of the options we discussed today, you will be able here in Arizona to use an ABLE account for housing rent or mortgage payments or other ways, paying for different housing options. So please stay tuned. They really are so connected, and they are complementary to trusts. A lot of people have been asking trust questions, and while we're not lawyers, it's a good idea to call the Arizona Center for Disability Law and things like that. We are going to have much, much more rich information rolling out in the next couple months, so please stay tuned for more webinars. So if anybody has those questions that you wanted to get answered, John, do you mind facilitating that? Again, we don't want anyone to feel that their question wasn't answered. And I want to thank you for being on today's webinar and for sharing this link. All of us, especially the professionals in the disability field here in Arizona, we get phone calls and emails all the time from people looking for options for loved ones and for themselves. And so just thank you so much for asking great questions, being here today. Thank you to Megan and Tracy and Ginger for sharing your info and your stories. So we're gonna facilitate those questions right now. John, if you want to do that, that would be awesome.
Sure can. We have one earlier in the chat from Lindsay. The comment was, hoping that when I'm ready, someone might be willing to talk to me for free. Also wondering how the ABLs might affect those with ESA accounts.
This is Ginger. I would be willing to talk with anybody about how we set up Candy's living environment and where we ran into problems and how things have worked well. I will type into the chat area what my email address is and somebody can get hold of me that way.
Thank you, Ginger. This question, or this answer is for Daryl. We currently do not have a date and time, but I see that you put your email to be placed on the listserv. So stay tuned, please. We have a question from Nancy, and she asks, will they allow longer than 2 or 3 visits to the ADH or even a group home prior to placement? My son transitions very slowly. I think that was for Tracy during the 2 or 3 transition visits.
Yeah, we would allow as many visits as necessary to make sure that everybody was comfortable with the match that was being made, and we always encourage families and our providers during the match process that if it doesn't feel right, to speak up and say something, and then we'll stop the process or look for a different provider that does feel like a better match, because it's so important that people are able to connect with each other to make a successful situation. So we'll take as much time as is necessary.
Thank you, Tracy. We have some comments that people can read through. See, I'm not seeing any other questions. I'll just kind of read through some of these comments. Adrienne states, there's a interest in several families getting together to purchase a home and hire a nonprofit to provide wraparound services. Let me know. It'd be great to explore this issue with a nonprofit who already has experience. Why not in Arizona? She provided her email address. Amy says, Adrienne, we have 2 homes like what you are describing and looking to add more. Currently collecting information and putting together best practices. Lindsay states, I do that with therapists too. Adrienne in response, cool Amy, I've already talked to a nonprofit about a possible training. And Sarah remarked, about our next webinar. So we'll still take a couple questions. Anyone like to ask? I'll just remind everyone we have ADDPC and IHD web links to the left, and then the files pod in the lower left where you can download the most current list or go to the website to check for a current document. And then also we have this presentation in a PDF. Adrian asks, Amy, will you send me contact info? Thanks. And then Nancy states, in an ADH, what is the backup if the couple or person wants to go on vacation or get sick, have surgery, etc.?
So each of our providers has a backup person or people that provides that care for the individual. Those folks also have to be background checked and go through training so that they are able to provide the same level of care for the person.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm not seeing any activity in the chat area for people typing. If there aren't any other questions or any other comments from the presenters, we can leave this window up for a little bit. Oh, we got some activity.
I would also just add, in terms of vacation, a lot of times the individuals go on vacation with their providers because their family, it's their second family, they're part of the household and the family, and so they all go on vacation together. So we've had folks go to California together. We've had folks go to as far as Europe together, on cruises together, and so as long as the biological family, if you will, or the guardian is okay with the person going along on the vacation, then we've had host home providers take the individuals who are living with them on vacation with them.
Well, thank you, everybody. We saved this chat, so if there are questions that you think about and you want to add them to the chat area, that'd be great. I'll leave the window open for a little bit for anyone who wants to download the files or go to the web links and kind of walk through the chat. We had a lot of links shared throughout this whole presentation. You can click on them. They're live and active, and then you can save them in your browser to your favorites if you need to. Looks like I have one more question here. It says, my son is now 23, lives in a group home in Phoenix. He is non-speaking and has sensory issues. Because his ISP says he needs one-on-one aids, does his level of support disqualify him from applying to ADH?
I think that would be and maybe an offline conversation about the level of support that he needs and the type of supports that he needs. But we are open to providing supports to anybody in an adult developmental home. And so it'd be a conversation with the support coordinator and then with the agency. So that'd be a great conversation for offline.
Well, thank you, everyone. If there are no further questions, we'll kind of leave it at that. Please stay tuned for the archive of this webinar on ADDP's website and also IHD's YouTube channel. So at this point, season's greetings, and hope everyone has a great holiday. Thank you.